Welcome back to my next episode on Climate Change Calculated. Today a Corona update with conclusions. So I want to show an analysis of my models and Germany's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, a review of my pandemic model, which I implemented for Germany and actually also for the rest of the world at the beginning of the pandemic. And a comparison of the COVID-19 deaths per million inhabitants across different countries and the correlation with vaccination rates. And also an analysis of lives saved and lost in Germany in comparison to the US and Singapore. If you're interested, stay tuned. So at the start of the pandemic, I implemented a model of the concurrently sick, which keeps the curve flat, which means which avoids high peaks in the infected people and hence overloading our health system. And this model can be found here in my GitHub in this Colab notebook. And it turns out we actually managed to flatten the curve even further from a daily growth rate, which I assumed in the beginning that we needed to reach 1.02, but we actually got down to 1.015 when we look at the past 3 years. So we can look here at this plot, and there we can actually also see the curve accurately predicted the duration of the pandemic. So now let's take a look. So here's the curve of the concurrently sick. In blue is the logistic model from March 2020. And in orange are the actual numbers from Germany. But keep in mind that there's an underreporting, which can be as high as like 50 or 100%. So there's a little bit, a certain distribution here. And I made this model here right in the middle of March, so that was just before this first orange peak here, when everybody assumed that the pandemic would be over in summer of 2020. Well, not everybody, but many people. But the model here says something else, right? Right from the beginning it says it's taking until at least mid-July 2022. And this curve now shows that we actually flattened the curve even more than I recommended with this growth rate. So we can actually check it out. Now clicking on the code and now change this factor of increase, this daily factor of increase from 1.02 to 1.015 and then let it run again. So we hide the code, right? So this can actually be done by everybody because this is basically the link that I just showed. So here the first thing you would do is run before, then it basically runs the data retrieval again, prepares the data that's based here on where the plot is based on, and then when it's done, we can run this plot again and see what the model says. And here you can see we actually get quite a good fit here for the pandemic. So that shows that with a slight deviation, this model was quite fitting from the beginning. So I'm happy with the performance of the model, and it also shows that by now, in the spring of 2023, it's pretty much over. The pandemic is done, at least the corona pandemic. So now we can compare the different COVID-19 death rates per million inhabitants for different countries. So when we look at Germany, it has a total of 2,034 deaths per million inhabitants from COVID-19. The US has 3,424 deaths per million inhabitants. And on the other side, Singapore has 302 deaths per million inhabitants. So this can also be seen in my model, which we can take a look at now. So this plot shows the accumulated death cases per million inhabitants for different countries. So here you can see France, Germany, Slovakia, here the US and Singapore. And these are not just model numbers, but the real numbers. And you can see here it goes up during the pandemic, of course. And you can see Germany here has the 2034. And this is like in the middle. And you can see here at the top actually is Slovakia. And then below here is the US with 3,424. And down here is Singapore with just 302 deaths per million inhabitants. So we can take now this rate and then calculate how much Germany has saved, life saved in comparison to the US, or lost in comparison to Singapore. Yeah, but first the correlation with the vaccination rates and measures across those different countries. So we can see that Germany has 230 vaccinations per 100 people, with the majority participating in measures such as mask wearing. The US has only 203 vaccinations per 100 people, with only roughly half of the population participating in measures like mask wearing. And Singapore has even more, has 261 vaccinations per 100 people, with a large majority of the people participating in the measures such as mask wearing. And this can also be seen in this plot, which I will show now. So in this plot from Our World in Data, you can see the COVID-19 vaccine doses administered per 100 people over time. So this is accumulated. And you can see that until late 2022, Singapore had 260 vaccination doses. Then Germany had 230, and the United States had 203 per 100 people. So you can see it's more than one per people because you have the refresher vaccinations. Yeah, so we can see a clear correlation between the number of deaths and the vaccination rates. And now we can do this calculation. What if Germany had different death rates from those different countries? How would the total death count would differ? So we can say that Germany saved approximately 1,390 lives per million inhabitants compared to the US, resulting in about 150,000 lives with a population of 83 million. So actually that's quite a lot, right? So our measures and the vaccination campaigns, they saved over 100,000 lives. It's like a mid-sized city, so it's quite substantial. But compared to Singapore, Germany lost about 1,773 lives per million inhabitants, and computed for 83 million, this means we lost 147,000 lives in comparison. So if we would have a successful vaccination campaign like in Singapore, another city, mid-sized city, would still have survived. So Germany is in this sense kind of in the middle field. So this leads me to the conclusions. My model of the concurrently sick not only worked as a policy guide, but also as a surprisingly accurate predictor for the duration of the pandemic. Internationally, there is a clear correlation between vaccination rate and lives saved and lost. And internationally, Germany fared in the middle field in between the US and Singapore. Yeah, so that should be it for today. See you next time. Bye-bye.